watching over Mark while he heals, and this whole setup becomes the backbone of a really slow, really patient bonding story between the two of them that plays out over the entire 2 months. And it works because at the start of it, Oliver is not exactly thrilled to be spending that much time with his father. He has got a lot of pent-up resentment sitting right under the surface, and it does not take long to figure out why. Oliver heard what Omni-Man said about his mother on Thraxa. He heard him call that relationship a mistake. And if your father calls the relationship that created you a mistake, it is pretty hard not to feel like you are the mistake too. That is the wound Oliver is carrying into this whole situation, and the show does not rush past it or resolve it too quickly. It just lets it sit there between them while they are stuck together waiting for Mark to wake up. Most of this is pulled directly from the comic book, and the show does a really good job of translating it because it never gets too sentimental or over-explains what Oliver is feeling. You just see it in the way he acts around Omni-Man at the beginning, and then slowly watch it start to change as the weeks go by. One of the more interesting moments in their storyline is when Omni-Man makes a proper grave for Conquest and sets up a full Viltrumite memorial for him. And that might seem like a weird thing to do for someone who was literally trying to kill your son not long ago, but the way Omni-Man explains it to Oliver makes a lot of sense within the Viltrumite worldview. Conquest was completely dedicated to his people and his empire. He believed everything he was told, he fought with everything he had, and he never wavered. From a Viltrumite perspective, that deserves respect regardless of which side he was on. The problem was never Conquest himself. The problem was who was giving him his orders and shaping his belief system. That was Thragg. That was always Thragg. And the show actually lets you sit with that idea for a second, which is cool because it raises a genuinely interesting question. Conquest even admitted in his own confessional to Mark that other Viltrumites were actually afraid of him because of how extreme and unhinged he was. So you do kind of wonder if Conquest had a different leader, a better leader, could he have been something completely different? Could that intensity and that total dedication have been pointed in a direction that was actually good? The honest answer is probably no. It feels like no matter who was telling him what to do, he was still going to be really crazy. But the point Omni-Man is making to Oliver is not really about Conquest specifically. It is about the bigger idea that the Viltrumites as a people are not beyond redemption. And Omni-Man is the only one of the three of them who was actually raised in Viltrum as a true Viltrumite. So he understands that culture and those people in a way that Mark and Oliver just cannot. This is also the part of the episode where they give Oliver the title treatment, cutting to the words, wishing that Mark really was invincible so he would survive his injuries. Which he does, obviously, it just takes him a couple of months to get there. And then there is the moment where Oliver starts talking about being weirdly attracted to the lobster in the tank at the restaurant back on Earth, which sounds like a completely random joke, but is actually a really specific reference to something that happens with Oliver much later in the comics when he is older. The show is planting that seed right now. If you have read the comics, you already know exactly what that is about. If you have not, just know that the show is not throwing that in randomly. It means something, and it will pay off eventually. No king shaming here, that is just where Oliver's story goes, and it is a lot. And then Omni-Man has this quiet realization that he now has to give Oliver the birds and the bees talk, which lands as a really funny beat in the middle of all this heavy emotional territory. It is very Charlie in the way the episode handles it, just dropping that moment in without making a huge deal out of it and moving on. That contrast between the heavy stuff and the casual funny moments is exactly what makes this whole storyline work. By the time Mark finally wakes up and stumbles over to Conquest's grave thinking the markers were for Omni-Man and Oliver because he passed out so long ago and could not find them, the bond between the three of them already feels completely different from where it started. Mark is genuinely relieved that Conquest is dead, but also a little sad about it too. So, while Omni-Man and Oliver are having their quiet bonding arc on one side of the episode, the actual Viltrumite War is moving really fast on the other side, and there is a lot happening across multiple storylines that all eventually connect together by the end. The show is juggling a lot of different pieces during these war segments, and for the most part, it handles all of them really well, using some of them for tension and some of them for comedy, and knowing exactly when to switch between the two. The first big Warside storyline is Alan and Tech Jacket. When we catch up with them, they are trapped on a ship that is headed to Glacia Prime, which is another system where the Coalition is going to be operating. So their whole plan is simple. Wait until they get there, bail off the ship as fast as possible, and make a break for the Coalition. And while they are waiting for that window, the show uses...
I'm not trying to kill the kid, but he needs to come with me.
D.A. Sinclair slaughtered students. Darkwing killed people in cold blood. CISO's working with murderers. You all saw it.
We're not having...
The Viltrumite War is not coming anymore. It is here. And episode 6 just threw everything at us all at once. 2 months of healing, 2 months of war, and by the end of it, Thragg is angrier than we have ever seen him. The Coalition is finally making real moves, and Mark is back on his feet just in time for things to get way, way worse. This episode covers a lot of ground really fast, and there are a ton of comic references and Easter eggs packed into it that are easy to miss if you blink. So we are going to break all of it down. The episode title is You Look Horrible, and that is not random at all. It is a direct reference to something the alternate timeline Eve said to Mark after his brutal fight with Angstrom Levy, and it is also something people say to him after the Conquest fight. So the title itself is basically the show winking at you, telling you that Mark is in rough shape again, barely holding on, not looking so hot. That is kind of the theme running through this entire episode. Everyone is barely holding it together, and the war has not even hit its worst point yet. The episode structure is interesting because the whole thing takes place over roughly 2 months. That is a big chunk of time, and the show covers it through a series of montages that keep bouncing back and forth between two storylines. You have Omni-Man and Oliver watching over Mark while he heals, and then you have the actual Viltrumite War playing out across the galaxy at the same time. These two storylines keep cutting between each other throughout the episode, and it works really well because one of them is this quiet, almost emotional bonding story, and the other is full-scale intergalactic war. The contrast between them makes both feel more intense. The opening scene sets everything up with Thetis giving his big call to action speech to the Coalition of Planets, officially declaring war on the Viltrumites. And while that is happening, the show immediately cuts to Thragg and the Viltrumites getting their own version of the same speech. So right from the start, you are watching both sides gear up at the exact same time, which does a really good job of making the war feel real and massive. Thragg ends his speech by reminding his people of Argyl's mantra, which is, all is ours. That line is really important, and it comes back later in the episode. The whole Viltrumite belief system is built around this idea that everything in existence belongs to them. Every planet, every race, every resource, it all belongs to Viltrum. That is not just propaganda either. That is something every single Viltrumite genuinely believes deep in their core because it was passed down from Argyl and now enforced by Thragg. They are not questioning it. They are not second-guessing it. They will do whatever Thragg tells them to do because of it, no matter how extreme or how horrifying it gets. And that idea actually becomes a really important conversation piece later when Omni-Man is trying to explain the Viltrumites to Oliver. Because the show is not just painting all Viltrumites as pure evil with no layers to them. Omni-Man's whole point is that the Viltrumites could actually be a force for good in the universe if they had the right leader pointing them in the right direction. They have the power, they have the drive, they have the dedication. The problem is not the people. The problem is who is at the top telling them what to do and what to believe. And right now, that person is Thragg. So as long as Thragg is alive and in charge, none of that changes. Which is exactly why killing Thragg is not just a military goal for the Coalition. It is the only goal that actually matters. Thetis echoes this at the end of the episode too. The plan is not to wipe out every single Viltrumite in the universe. That is not realistic. And honestly, not even the point. The plan is to get to the Viltrum home planet, kill Thragg, and then deal with the rest of them one by one once they scatter. Because without Thragg holding them together, the whole empire starts to fall apart. He is the center of everything, and the Coalition knows it. While the Viltrumite War is kicking off across the galaxy, the show pulls you back down to something much quieter and honestly way more emotionally interesting than you might expect from an episode that is supposed to be about an intergalactic war. Omni-Man and Oliver are camped out,